I find that incredibly valuable. Let's go back to the Clark effect from a commercial standpoint. All sellouts.
Hold on. We also had Stephanie White hating on Caitlin Clark's fan base, talking about they're toxic and all this stuff. Whoa. You ain't have to come over here. We didn't ask for your ass to be here. You knew what it was. For one, that's false. You following that Scott Agnes lie. That's false. The fan base is not toxic and all of that. People just hold y'all accountable for y'all's actions, and y'all don't like it. That's the truth. That's the truth.
You guys sold out across the spectrum, record ticket prices. I mean, the growth just kept going. Every time you thought there was a ceiling, you guys just broke right through it.
Pay attention to what Lisa Bluder just said there. Social media, television exposure, and a style of play that was must-see basketball. That's the formula that turned Caitlin Clark into a generational phenomenon at Iowa. But here's what makes this interview significant right now, in January 2025. Stephanie White is coaching the complete opposite system in Indiana. The Fever went from the #1 offense in the WNBA post-Olympic break to a completely restructured system that doesn't center around Clark's strengths. And Bluder, the coach who developed Clark for 4 years, just laid out exactly why that approach worked. The contrast couldn't be more obvious.
Jesus. Here it says, Lisa Bluder reveals the 2 biggest challenges of coaching Caitlin Clark. Former Iowa Hawkeyes head coach Lisa Bluder got real about the reality of coaching Caitlin Clark. Here it says, it's wild to remember that less than 2 years ago, Caitlin Clark was still playing college basketball at the University of Iowa. Given all that Clark has already experienced, hold on, let me make sure my mic is right. Okay, we good. Has already experienced and accomplished in the WNBA since that time. Her iconic college career feels like ages ago, although it's impossible not to think back upon these days fondly when number 22 was setting NCAA records and leading the Hawkeyes to 2 consecutive national championship games. And this is what I'm saying. You can't compare what Paige and all these other people doing at UConn. UConn about to win another national championship and Paige ain't there. Just like they won with Maya Moore, just like they won when Maya Moore left, just like they won when Breanna Stewart left, just like they won when Diana Taurasi left. The fact that she got Iowa to back-to-back natties is insane. Like, come on now, let's be serious.
Lisa Bluder coached Caitlin Clark through the pandemic isolation, through 2 consecutive national championship runs, through the explosion of media attention that no college player had ever experienced before. She identified 2 major challenges in that clip. First, getting Clark to become a leader during COVID when there was nobody in the stands and relationships were hard to build. Second, managing all the noise and people wanting a piece of her during those final 2 years. Bluder said she was amazed at how Clark handled it without getting a big head, staying a goofy kid instead of becoming a diva. Now contrast that with what's happening in Indiana right now. Stephanie White took over a team that was scoring over 100 points regularly after the Olympic break. Clark and Kelsey Mitchell were putting on nightly shows. Aaliyah Boston was dominating inside. The offensive system was clicking, and White immediately changed everything. She's talked publicly about Kelsey Mitchell being the priority, not Clark. She had Clark playing small forward at one point, taking the ball out of her hands. She brought in Natasha Howard and apparently promised her she could compete for MVP, according to Howard's own comments before the season.
Really, first, during the panoramic, I ain't trying to say certain words, YouTube be tripping. There was nobody in the stands. It was hard to build relationships because of the isolation. To get her to become a good leader, it took time because she was so used to doing everything on her own, but she learned it. And she learned it really well. Second, at the end of her career, there was so much noise and all the people that wanted a piece of her. I'm amazed at how she handled it. She didn't get a big head. She was still a goofy kid instead of becoming a prima donna. And here she said, Bluder has expressed in the past that it took Clark some time to warm up to her Hawkeye teammates as a freshman before blossoming into a great leader. And her stance on Clark being able to block out all the noise that came during her upperclassmen years also makes sense. Several of Clark's teammates with the Indiana Fever have spoken about her goofy side, which Bluder also alluded to, it's awesome to hear that Clark has managed to keep this aspect of her personality intact.
Bluder reveals something crucial in that segment. It took time for Clark to become a good leader because she was so used to doing everything on her own. That's the key insight. Clark developed into an elite leader by her junior and senior years at Iowa, but it required a coach who understood her process and gave her the freedom to grow into that role organically. Bluder didn't try to force Clark into a predetermined system. She built the system around Clark's unique abilities. The Iowa offense under Bluder was simple. Give Clark the ball, space the floor, and let her create. That's not lazy coaching. That's smart coaching. When you have a player who can score from 35 feet, deliver no-look passes through traffic, and read defenses better than anyone in the country, you don't restrict her with rigid offensive sets. You give her freedom with instruction. That's exactly what made the Fever so dangerous in the second half of last season. Christy Sides, for all her limitations as a head coach, at least understood one fundamental truth. Get out of Caitlin Clark's way and let her. The Fever's offense became nearly unstoppable because they simplified everything. Clark had the ball, Mitchell played off her perfectly, and Boston cleaned up inside. It wasn't complicated, but it was devastatingly effective.
Pressure she constantly has to deal with. Now, Mama Bluder has been the best. I wish Lisa Bluder was still interested in coaching, because it's clear Stephanie White don't know what the hell she's doing with Caitlin Clark. Stephanie White at one point in time had Caitlin Clark playing small forward. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Put the girl as small forward, taking the ball out her hands. She keeps talking about, oh, this is Kelsey Mitchell's the priority. She was the priority last year. She'll be the priority. This lady don't know what the hell she's doing. I think she was sent over here to sabotage this whole thing. Stephanie White doesn't know what the hell she's doing. You had the #1 offense with the Indiana Fever, especially that post-Olympic break with Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell putting on shows with Aaliyah Boston night in and night out, scoring 100 plus every night. And you come here and change the entire offense. You seem like you're more focused on Ari McDonald, who was at the unemployment line before the season even started.
Here's where this gets really interesting. Bluder talks about how Clark didn't become a diva despite all the attention and pressure. She stayed humble, stayed goofy, stayed connected to her teammates. That's a direct contradiction to the narrative that some WNBA media members and even Stephanie White herself have pushed about Clark's fan base being toxic and problematic. White made comments before the season about the fan base being toxic. That's a bizarre position for a head coach to take. You don't show up to coach the most popular player in women's basketball and immediately alienate her supporters. Those fans are the reason the Fever sold out every arena last season. They're the reason the team's valuations skyrocketed. They're the reason WNBA ratings hit historic highs whenever Clark played. But here's what's really happening. White is following the same playbook that Scott Agnes and certain Indianapolis media members have used. Blame the fans instead of addressing legitimate criticism. When people point out that White's offensive system doesn't maximize Clark's abilities, the response isn't to defend the system with evidence. The response is to call the critics toxic. That's not accountability, that's deflection.
Who got the best access to Clark during these developmental college years was Lisa Bluder, her Iowa head coach. Bluder retired from coaching after Clark's senior year in 2024, and her longtime assistant Jan Jensen took over the program, and Jan Jensen's doing a hell of a job as well. While Bluder has been seen at Iowa games and is still a part of the Midwest women's basketball scene, she occasionally does color commentary on the Big Ten Network. She has certainly been out of the spotlight more than she was as a head coach, especially during Clark's 4-year tenure in Iowa City. Here she says, Lisa Bluder details the hardest part of coaching Caitlin Clark. At one point in their discussion, Bluder was asked, what was the hardest part about coaching Clark?
Bluder's point about Clark leading Iowa to back-to-back national championship games is crucial context that gets lost in current WNBA debates. People want to compare Paige Booker's success at UConn to Clark's time at Iowa, but the comparison doesn't hold up. UConn has won multiple national championships with different star players over decades. They won with Diana Taurasi. They won with Maya Moore. They won with Breanna Stewart. That's a program built to win, regardless of who's on the roster. Iowa had never been to a national championship game before. Caitlin Clark, not once in the program's history. And Clark took them there twice in consecutive years. She put Iowa women's basketball on the map nationally. That's not a system carrying a player. That's a player elevating an entire program. And Bluder understood what she had. She didn't try to make Clark fit into Iowa's historical identity. She let Clark create a new identity for Iowa basketball. That's the coaching philosophy that Stephanie White seems to fundamentally misunderstand. White keeps talking about implementing her system, about establishing roles, about making sure veterans like Natasha Howard and Kelsey Mitchell get their touches, but that's backwards thinking when you have a generational talent. The system should serve the talent, not restrict it.
Let's talk about what are the, it's not just a Clarkonomics. There are other factors that probably help drive that, I would think. Or was it just an individual phenomenon based on a generational player? What are the factors that you think created Clarkonomics?
Well, I do think that she is a generational player and people were attracted to that. I think that, you know, she played with a passion and a joy and a just lack of fear of failure that people were attracted to. They kind of wanted to be like Caitlin in that aspect. And so I think, you know, she was the right player, but I also, you know, here we just tore down social media. I do think social media had a huge role in promoting her. And we have a great social media team at the University of Iowa. They do an unbelievable job. And I think that helped generate the excitement about her. Also, television exposure. The more people got to see us play, the more they fell in love with her. They fell in love with the style of play of our team and of other women on our team. I mean, Kate Martin's having a fabulous year right now for the Aces. Started for the Aces.
And this is it definitely that style of play was must see. And
listen to how Bluder describes the style of play that attracted fans. She talks about Clark playing with passion, joy, and a lack of fear of failure. People were attracted to that energy. They wanted to be like Caitlin in that aspect. Then Bluder mentions Kate Martin having a fabulous year with the Aces, starting for them. That's another player who thrived in Iowa's system and is now succeeding in the WNBA. The common thread is freedom. Bluder gave her players the freedom to play with joy, to take risks, to express themselves on the court. That's why Iowa's games were must-see television. It wasn't just Clark's individual brilliance. It was the way the entire team played. They played fast, they played loose, they played with confidence. Now look at what's happening in Indiana under Stephanie White's system. The pace has slowed down. The ball movement is more structured, but less dynamic. Clark is being asked to play more off the ball, which is insane when she's one of the best ball handlers and playmakers in the world. The offense looks mechanical instead of organic. And most importantly, it's not working as well as what they had before. The Fever's offensive rating dropped after White took over. That's not speculation, that's statistical fact. They went from one of the most efficient offenses in the league to a middle-of-the-pack unit, and White's response has been to double down on her system instead of adapting to her personnel. Here's what makes Lisa Bluder's comments so significant right now. She's not actively coaching anymore, so she has no agenda. She's not trying to protect her job or build her reputation. She's simply reflecting on what worked when coaching Caitlin Clark, and her insights directly contradict everything Stephanie White is doing in Indiana. Bluder talks about the two biggest challenges of coaching Clark. First, helping her develop leadership skills during the isolation of the pandemic. That required patience, understanding, and trust. Bluder didn't force Clark into a leadership mold. She created an environment where Clark could grow into that role naturally. By Clark's junior and senior years, she was leading Iowa to historic success while handling unprecedented media attention. Second, managing all the noise and attention during Clark's final 2 years at Iowa. Bluder describes being amazed at how Clark handled it without developing an ego. That's crucial context, because it shows Clark's character. Despite becoming the biggest star in college basketball history, despite breaking Pete Maravich's scoring record, despite leading Iowa to back-to-back championship games, Clark remained humble and team-oriented. Now think about what Stephanie White is dealing with in Indiana. She has a player who's already proven she can handle massive pressure and attention. A player who's already developed into an elite leader. A player who just won Rookie of the Year and led the Fever to the playoffs for the first time in years. And instead of building on that success, White is trying to reinvent everything. White brought in Natasha Howard and apparently told her she could compete for MVP. That's according to Howard's own comments. Why would you tell a veteran forward she can win MVP when you have the league's most popular player and a legitimate MVP candidate already on your roster? That creates immediate tension and conflicting priority. It suggests White made promises to multiple players that can't all be fulfilled simultaneously. White also publicly stated that Kelsey Mitchell was the priority last year and will remain the priority this year. That's a bizarre thing to say, when Mitchell herself has said she loves playing with Clark and their partnership was the key to the Fever's success. Mitchell doesn't need to be the priority to be effective. She was incredibly effective last season playing off Clark's playmaking. They complemented each other perfectly, but White seems determined to establish some kind of hierarchy that doesn't need to exist. Basketball isn't about one player being the priority. It's about putting players in positions to succeed based on their strength. Clark's strength is having the ball in her hands, creating for herself and others. Mitchell's strength is scoring off the catch and attacking closeouts. Boston's strength is finishing inside and protecting the rim. The system should maximize all three, not force them into rigid roles. The comparison to Christy Sides is instructive here. Sides had plenty of flaws as a head coach. Her timeout management was questionable. Her defensive schemes were inconsistent. Her rotations sometimes made no sense. But she understood one fundamental truth. Let Caitlin Clark be Caitlin Clark. Don't overthink it. Don't try to fit her into a box. Just give her the ball and let her create. That's why the Fever's offense exploded after the Olympic break last season. Sides simplified everything. The offense became, Clark brings it up. Everyone spaces the floor. Clark decides whether to shoot, drive, or pass. Mitchell spots up or cuts. Boston sets screens and rolls. It's basic basketball, but it's effective basketball when you have elite talent. Stephanie White looked at that system and decided it needed to be completely restructured. She wants more ball movement, more set plays, more defined roles. On paper, that sounds sophisticated. In practice, it's slowing down the Fever's most dangerous weapon. Clark's ability to create offense in transition and in the open floor. Lisa Bluder never would have made that mistake. She understood that when you have a player like Caitlin Clark, you build around her unique ability. You don't try to make her fit into your preferred system. The system serves the player, not the other way around. Bluder also understood something else crucial: the importance of joy and freedom in basketball. She talks about how Clark played with passion and a lack of fear of failure. That's what made Iowa's games so entertaining. Clark wasn't afraid to take a 35-footer with 20 seconds left on the shot clock. She wasn't afraid to throw a behind-the-back pass in traffic. She played with creativity and confidence, because Bluder gave her the freedom to do so. That freedom is what's missing in Indiana right now under Stephanie White. The offense looks constrained. Clark is playing more carefully, more mechanically. She's still producing good numbers because she's incredibly talented, but the joy and spontaneity that defined her game at Iowa and during the second half of last WNBA season isn't as visible. And here's the thing about basketball at the highest level: talent alone isn't enough. Players need to feel empowered and trusted by their coaches. They need to feel free to make plays and take risks. When a coach implements a system that restricts a player's natural instincts, that player becomes less effective even if their skill level hasn't changed. That's what's happening with Caitlin Clark in Indiana. White's system is fighting against Clark's instincts instead of enhancing them. And the results speak for themselves. The Fever's offense is less efficient, less dynamic, and less entertaining than it was under the simplified system they ran at the end of last season. The irony is that Stephanie White is considered an offensive-minded coach. She's supposed to be a system builder, someone who can implement sophisticated offensive schemes. But sophistication doesn't equal effectiveness. Sometimes the best system is the simplest one. Give the ball to your best player, and let her create. Lisa Bluder figured that out at Iowa. Christy Sides figured it out eventually with the Fever. Stephanie White still hasn't figured it out, and it's costing the Fever wins and momentum heading into the new season. So the question becomes, will White adapt, or will she continue forcing her system regardless of the result? Because if she continues down this path, if she keeps trying to make Caitlin Clark fit into a predetermined role instead of building around her strengths, the Fever are going to waste a year of Clark's prime. And in a league where championship windows are short and competition is increasing with expansion, wasting a year is inexcusable. Lisa Bluder's comments should be required viewing for Stephanie White. They're a masterclass in how to coach a generational talent. Trust them. Empower them. Give them freedom within structure. Build the system around their strengths, not the other way around. And most importantly, don't overthink it. The formula for success with Caitlin Clark isn't complicated. Iowa proved it over 4 years. The Fever proved it in the second half of last season. Give her the ball, space the floor, and let her create. Everything else is just noise. What do you think? Is Stephanie White the right coach for Caitlin Clark? Or should the Fever have kept it simple and built around what was already working? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more WNBA analysis that cuts through the noise and focuses on what actually matters: winning basketball.